Alright, hey, welcome to example 12 for the destruction tutorials. In this one we're just going to go over a couple examples how to get some more interesting breaking patterns in your fracture. This is inspired by another artist called Stephen Kipping. He also has his own excellent, really great tutorials on Applied Knee, I think it's called. So definitely go check him out, Stephen Kipping. But yeah, I just want to cover it here as well. But because I use this a lot when I have to break up things and I kind of have to make a more interesting shape than just regular Voronoi pattern. So first of all, we are gonna go ahead and do the normal things. We're just gonna scatter some points in our volume here. We're gonna have this box, volume, do some volume noise on it like this, scatter some points, so we get a cool shape like this. And then on the other hand of this, we're not gonna straight in plug this geometry like this, because we will get this like really boring Voronoi fractures, right? Instead, we're gonna do something a little bit more interesting here. We are gonna do a attribute VOP or a point VOP here afterwards, after this. Make sure this is a polygon mesh. And in this, we are simply gonna do something like this. We're gonna take the position of each of these points in this mesh here. We're gonna output them to a new attribute called pold. We're gonna put it to a vector, and that's it. That basically means that the position, it's gonna stay here, right? But the initial position, this position is gonna be also copied onto another attribute called pold. So whenever I do anything to this, let's add a transfer after here. If I decide to transfer this up, let's say whatever, the actual position of this changes, but not in the pold, because this one stays the same, because it's a stored attribute that doesn't relate to the position anymore. It's simply a vector. So that's cool. Let's keep that. Let's keep it, and let's see what else we can do. Now we're gonna mess it up a little bit. We're gonna add a mountain like this. Just garble it up like this. Just make it look weird. Then feed that into Voronoi fracture and fracture that. If we now do an exploded view after here, we're gonna see what it looks like. We are still gonna have these shapes of actual Voronoi though, but it's gonna be messed up like that. So instead, what if we do this? We take the position that we stored here, the pold, it still goes through everything here. It still goes in here. We make a point VOP here, and we simply plug that in to the position here. So instead of plugging this position here, which gives us the jumble up geometry, we plug this vector here, this stored attribute called pold that we can import with a bind. Just put pold and a vector and put that to the point, and we get our geometry back looking like this. But the cool thing now is if we do some new normals to it with the facet and post-compute normals, our pieces are way more interesting. They're a lot more interesting looking. Look at, for example, look at this piece right now. It has multiple edges, multiple like this, like more like jagged. If we go ahead and select these and disable them, we can clearly see a big change in the kind of detail and kind of an interesting look that these pieces get. If you do an exploded view, we can clearly see that it looks way more interesting. It doesn't look like Voronoi anymore. It doesn't look like so boring and simple. It looks more detailed. And if you then go ahead and add some interior detail to that and some clustering, you know, we can start getting some really interesting results here. Let's have a look at that. Let's go here. Let's add interior detail. Let's put a detail size to something smaller, even smaller than that. Let's try 0.05. Let it calculate, and then up the noise amplitude. Up the frequency. Yeah, you get my drift. You can get way more interesting looking pieces by doing this, which is cool. Let's switch this off. Let's switch off cluster. That's one way. That's one of the techniques to get like these kind of interesting shapes. And it's always like finding creative ways to make the piece look interesting from here. It's really cool. For example, this next example here, we're gonna have the same box. We're gonna have the same kind of pieces like this. But instead, we're gonna store the attribute here as we did before with a bind, the position. Now we're gonna squeeze it like this. Then mountain it up a little bit with some noise. Fracture it. And it's gonna look pretty weird if we do an exploded view after it. Just like that. I don't know. It's like weird. Anyway. If we now go to this VOP here and we take the p-old and plug it into position. The p-old is the attribute we stored here. It's gonna look like this. And if we pause compute the normals and do an exploded view, we get shapes like this, which is kind of like wood looking, right? So it's all about like finding these interesting ways to create the pieces, to make them look interesting, cool, and detailed, and all that. Yeah, so that's it. And then the third example is kind of similar to the first example. I just wanted to show how to do it without the mountain stop. So we store the attribute, we scatter some points, we don't want a fracture on this weird looking shit here. We're just gonna do a point position to the turbulent noise and then add that on top and add it back. We did this in the point tutorials, so I think you guys know what this is, or maybe did in VOPs, whatever. Basically, turbulence takes the position, outputs a vector. We can add this vector on top of the original position and put it here. So it's gonna mess it up like this. Then shatter it, restore the position. Shatter it, restore the old position, recompute the normals, and explode the view. And we get like kind of weird looking shapes here as well. Like really like curves and like these sickle. I don't know if that's what it's called, but yeah, really interesting things that it's gonna look a little bit cooler once you simulate them, because it actually is gonna look more detailed. So yeah, I just wanted to show this, and I just wanted to say to you guys that it's all about finding these kind of interesting patterns, all these interesting shapes, all these interesting ways to do RBD. Because making it simply with a Voronoi shatter and just throwing a bullet on there, it's like really boring, really plain looking. So it's all about being an artist, finding these kind of cool ways and sheets to do things. Anyways, thank you guys for watching this tutorial, and I'll see you in the next one.